My name is Jessica Torres, and I'm 28 years old. For the past 3 years, I've been living in what most people would call a nightmare, except nightmares end when you wake up. This one just kept going, day after day, until the night my mother stood in front of our entire extended family and called me a leech. That was the night everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started. Back to the day I made the biggest mistake of my life. The day I moved back home. 3 years ago, I was living my best life in Portland. I had a decent job as a software developer at a startup, a small but cozy apartment in the Pearl District, and a group of friends who actually appreciated me. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Then I got the call. It was my younger brother, Marcus. His voice was shaking when he told me that Dad had collapsed at work. Massive heart attack. They didn't know if he was going to make it. I was on a plane within 6 hours. Dad survived, but barely. The doctors said he needed constant monitoring, lifestyle changes, medication management. He couldn't work anymore. And Mom had never worked a day in her adult life. She'd been a stay-at-home wife for 30 years, and the idea of getting a job now at 55 seemed to terrify her more than Dad's medical bills. I remember sitting in that sterile hospital room, watching my father sleep with tubes coming out of his arms, and thinking, they need me. I have to help. Marcus was only 23, fresh out of college, barely making $30,000 a year at his entry-level marketing job. My older sister, Rachel, lived in New York with her banker husband. She sent a check for $5,000 and a card that said, "Thinking of you." That was the extent of her involvement. So it fell to me. I told my boss I needed family medical leave. I sublet my apartment. I packed 2 suitcases and flew back to Sacramento, thinking I'd stay for maybe 3 months, just until Dad got back on his feet, just until we figured out a long-term plan. 3 months turned into 3 years. At first, it felt good to be needed. Mom was overwhelmed, Dad was depressed and weak, and I could actually help. I set up a spreadsheet for his medications. I coordinated with his doctors. I organized the medical bills and started negotiating payment plans with the hospital. That was when I realized just how bad their financial situation was. Dad's medical insurance through his job had ended when he went on disability. The COBRA payments were astronomical. They had exactly $4,000 in savings and a mortgage that was underwater from a refinance they'd done 5 years ago. Credit card debt was stacking up. The property tax was overdue. They were drowning, and they hadn't told anyone. "Maya, honey, you're so good with numbers," Mom said one afternoon, her eyes wet with tears. "Could you just take a look? Maybe you can figure something out." I figured something out, all right. I figured out that I was going to have to become the sole breadwinner for a family of 4. I found a remote job with a tech company in Seattle. Thank God for the pandemic normalizing remote work. The pay was slightly less than my Portland job, but it was enough. I told myself it was temporary. Once Dad recovered, once they got back on their feet, I'd move back out and resume my life. But recovery never came. Dad's heart was too damaged. He couldn't return to his old work. He applied for full disability, which meant months of waiting, mountains of paperwork, and eventually a small monthly check that barely covered his medications. Meanwhile, the bills kept coming. I started paying the mortgage. Just for a few months, I told myself. Then I started paying the utilities because the gas was about to be shut off. Then the property tax because we were facing a lien. Then the car insurance because Marcus needed to drive to work. My paychecks evaporated before I could even see them. I had a room, my old childhood bedroom, painted the same lavender color from when I was 16. My bed was a full-size mattress on a frame that creaked. My desk was pushed against the wall where my high school debate trophies still collected dust. This was supposed to be temporary. This was supposed to be just until things stabilized. But things never stabilized. They just got worse. Around the 6-month mark, something subtle started to change. Mom stopped asking if I could help with bills. She started expecting it. When the electricity bill came, she'd just leave it on my desk with a sticky note that said, "Due by the 15th, with a little heart drawn next to it. The heart was supposed to make it sweet, I guess. Like she was doing me a favor by reminding me to pay for the roof over my own head. Rachel called once every few weeks, usually when she wanted to talk about her problems. Her nanny was flaky. Her book club was drama. Her husband worked too much. When I tried to tell her about Dad's declining health or the financial stress, she'd say things like, "That sounds really hard, Maya. I'm sure you're handling it great." Then she'd change the subject. Marcus, meanwhile, had started dating a girl named Bethany, and suddenly he was never home. He'd crash in her apartment most nights, showing up only to do laundry or raid the fridge. When I asked him to chip in for groceries, just a little, maybe $50 a month, he looked at me like I'd asked him to donate a kidney. "I'm barely making ends meet as it is," he said. "Besides, you make way more than me." That became the refrain. "You make more." As if that erased the fact that I was supporting all of them. Dad spent most of his time in the living room recliner, watching TV and sleeping. Some days were better than others. Some days he'd seem almost like his old self, cracking jokes, asking about my work. Other days, he'd just stare at the television screen with empty eyes, and I knew he was thinking about how his life had narrowed down to this: a recliner, a remote, and a daily cocktail of medications he couldn't afford without his daughter's salary. I felt bad for him. I really did. But the guilt was suffocating. By the end of the first year, I wasn't just paying bills. I was managing everything. I scheduled all of Dad's doctor appointments. I picked up his prescriptions. I coordinated with his disability case manager. I handled the health insurance claims. I dealt with the medical billing departments when they inevitably screwed something up. I also did most of the grocery shopping because Mom had stopped cooking regularly. She'd make dinner maybe twice a week, usually something simple like spaghetti or rotisserie chicken from Costco. The rest of the time, I was ordering takeout or throwing together meals from whatever was in the fridge. I did my own laundry, obviously, but I also ended up doing Dad's because Mom said her back hurt too much to carry the baskets. I'd find Marcus's laundry piled in the hallway, and if I didn't wash it, it would just sit there for weeks. I cleaned the bathrooms because no one else did. I took out the trash. I mowed the lawn. I called the plumber when the kitchen sink backed up. I scheduled the HVAC maintenance. I dealt with the property management company when the neighbors complained about our fence. And I worked 40, sometimes 50 hours a week at my remote job, taking video calls from my childhood bedroom while trying to ignore the sound of Judge Judy blaring from the living room TV. I was exhausted all the time. I'd wake up tired. I'd go to bed tired. My friends from Portland stopped texting because I never responded. I dropped out of group chats because I didn't have the energy to keep up. My life had shrunk down to this house, this family, this endless cycle of work and obligation. And nobody noticed. Or if they did, nobody said thank you. Around the 18-month mark, I started to crack. I remember the exact moment. I was at the grocery store, filling my cart with the usual haul: Dad's low-sodium everything, Mom's favorite yogurt, Marcus's protein powder that cost $40 a container, the gluten-free bread that Rachel had recommended because she'd read an article about inflammation. I was in the checkout line, watching the total climb higher and higher, and I felt this wave of anger crash over me. I was spending $400 on groceries for a family that barely acknowledged my existence. That night, I tried to talk to Mom about it. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something," I said, finding her in the living room folding laundry. "I'm feeling really overwhelmed with all the expenses. I think we need to come up with a better plan." She looked up at me with this confused expression, like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean, honey?" "I mean, I'm paying for everything. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the car insurance. It's a lot. And I'm also doing most of the housework and managing all of Dad's medical stuff. I need some help. Her face shifted. The confusion melted into something harder. Maya, we didn't ask you to come back here. You chose to move home. I felt like I'd been slapped. I moved home because Dad almost died, Mom. Because you needed help. And we appreciate that, honey. We really do. But you're acting like we're forcing you to stay. If you want to leave, you can leave. The way she said it, so calm, so matter-of-fact, made my blood run cold. Because we both knew I couldn't leave. Not really. What would happen to them if I did? I tried to bring it up again a few weeks later, this time approaching it differently. I suggested that maybe we could all sit down and create a budget together. Maybe Marcus could contribute $100 a month. Maybe Rachel could send something regularly instead of her sporadic guilt checks. Maybe Mom could look into getting a part-time job, just something small. You want me to work at my age? Mom said, her voice rising. After everything I've done for this family? I'm not saying anything bad, I just think. You think I should abandon your father when he needs me most? You think I should go flip burgers so you can save a little money? That's not what I'm saying at all. You know, Maya, when I was your age, I would have done anything for my parents. I never would have complained about helping them. But your generation, you're all so selfish. Everything's about you. I stopped trying after that. Year 2 was when I started to realize the truth. I wasn't here because they needed me. I was here because I was convenient. Dad's disability had finally come through. It wasn't much, but combined with his small pension, they were bringing in about $3,000 a month. If they'd downsized to a smaller place, if they'd been willing to make sacrifices, they could have managed. But they didn't want to manage. They wanted to keep living in their 4-bedroom house with the 2-car garage. They wanted to keep their lifestyle intact. And I was the one making that possible. Marcus moved in with Bethany officially, but he kept his room at the house. Just in case, he said. Just in case of what, he never specified. He stopped contributing anything at all. Rachel visited for Christmas that year and stayed for 3 days. She spent most of that time shopping and getting brunch with her old high school friends. When she left, she gave me a gift card to Sephora for $50 and told me I should treat myself more. I wanted to throw it in her face. But the worst part wasn't my siblings. It was Mom. She'd started treating me less like a daughter and more like a live-in assistant. She'd ask me to pick up her dry cleaning on my way home from the grocery store. She'd hand me her phone and ask me to figure out why her Facebook wasn't working. She'd leave her Amazon packages on my desk for me to return because she'd ordered the wrong size. And she'd complain. Constantly. The house was too cold. The house was too hot. Why didn't we have better snacks? Why was I always on my computer? Why didn't I spend more time with Dad? One afternoon, I snapped. Maybe because I'm working to pay for this house, Mom. She looked at me with genuine surprise, like she'd forgotten that small detail. Well, you don't have to be rude about it, Maya. I started keeping a list after that. A mental tally of every bill I paid, every task I completed, every hour I spent managing their lives. The numbers were staggering. In 2 years, I'd paid over $60,000 toward their household expenses. I'd spent countless hours on unpaid labor. I'd put my entire life on hold. And I was the rude one. By year 3, I was running on fumes. My job performance was slipping. I'd started missing deadlines, showing up to meetings unprepared. My boss had pulled me aside for a check-in, where she gently suggested I seemed burned out. I'd nodded and promised to do better, all while knowing that nothing was going to change. I'd gained 20 pounds from stress eating and never exercising. My skin was breaking out like I was a teenager again. I had constant tension headaches. My doctor suggested I might be depressed and offered to prescribe something, but I never filled the prescription because I didn't have time to go to the pharmacy. My entire existence had become a hamster wheel of obligation. And then, in October, 3 months before everything exploded, something happened that should have been a wake-up call. Dad got better. Not completely, but significantly. His new medication regimen was working. He had more energy. He'd started taking short walks around the neighborhood. His cardiologist was impressed with his progress. "Your father's doing remarkably well," the doctor told me at his 6-month checkup. "He's stable. As long as he maintains his medication schedule and lifestyle changes, he should have many good years ahead." I was so happy I almost cried. Finally, things were going to get better. Except they didn't. Because Dad getting better didn't change anything. He still sat in his recliner all day. Mom still expected me to handle everything. The bills still came, and I still paid them. The only difference was now there was no medical crisis to justify it. I was trapped, and I'd walked into the trap myself. That was when I started planning my exit. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I'd learned that lesson already. I started by opening a new bank account that nobody knew about. I set up direct deposit to split my paycheck, enough to cover the household bills in the old account, and the rest funneled secretly into the new one. I began apartment hunting. Nothing in Sacramento proper. Too expensive and too close. I looked at smaller cities within an hour's drive. Roseville, Folsom, even Davis. I needed something I could afford on half my income, something that would allow me to rebuild my savings. I found a place in Elk Grove. A one-bedroom apartment in an older complex, 650 square feet, $800 a month. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Or it would be. I filled out the application. I paid the deposit from my secret account. I got approved. My move-in date was set for December 1st. I planned to tell my family on November 15th, giving them 2 weeks' notice to figure out their finances. But then Thanksgiving happened, and I didn't make it to November 15th. Mom insisted on hosting Thanksgiving at our house, which meant I was doing most of the preparation. I'd taken 2 days off work to clean, shop, and cook. I'd spent $400 on groceries for the meal. I'd stayed up until midnight the night before, making pies and prepping the turkey. Rachel flew in with her husband, Derek. Marcus brought Bethany. Mom had also invited her sister, my Aunt Linda, along with Linda's husband and their 2 adult children. The house was packed. Everyone was drinking wine and laughing, and for a brief moment, I felt something like happiness. This was family. This was what I'd been working for, right? These moments of togetherness. We sat down to eat at 4 o'clock. The table looked beautiful. I'd even bought flowers for the centerpiece. The turkey was perfect. The sides were delicious. Everyone was complimenting the food, and I felt a small glow of pride. Then Aunt Linda asked the question that changed everything. "So Maya, when are you going to get your own place? You must be dying to get out on your own again." It was an innocent question. She didn't know the situation, not really. She probably thought I was just living at home to save money or something. But Mom's face changed. "Maya has her own place," Mom said, her voice tight. "She lives here." "I know, I just meant. This is her home. She's lucky to have it, honestly. Rent in Sacramento is outrageous. Where else could she live this comfortably and save money?" I felt my throat close up. Save money. I'd saved exactly $0 in 3 years. "Actually," I said carefully, "I've been helping out with expenses quite a bit." Rachel looked up from her plate. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've been paying the mortgage and most of the bills. Since I moved back." The table went quiet. Rachel blinked. "Wait, what? You've been paying Mom and Dad's mortgage?" She's been contributing, Mom said quickly. We all contribute to this household. Contributing. The word came out sharper than I intended. Mom, I've paid over $60,000 in the last 3 years. Derek, Rachel's husband, let out a low whistle. 60,000? That's not accurate, Mom said, her face flushing red. Maya, this isn't the time. You asked me to look at the bills, remember? When Dad got sick. And then you just expected me to keep paying them. Nobody expected anything. Mom's voice was rising now. You chose to help. You volunteered. Because you said you needed help. Because Dad was dying. He's not dying anymore and you're still here, Mom snapped. If you're so unhappy, why don't you leave? Nobody's keeping you here, Maya. But maybe if you did leave, you'd realize how good you have it. Living rent-free. I'm paying your mortgage. The entire table flinched. Mom's face twisted into something ugly. You're living in our house, eating our food, using our utilities. I'm buying the food. I'm paying the utilities. Enough. Everyone looked at Dad, who had risen slightly from his chair, his face pale. Both of you, stop it. This is Thanksgiving. But Mom wasn't done. She turned to Aunt Linda, to Rachel, to the whole table, her voice dripping with wounded dignity. Do you see what I deal with? I open my home to my daughter, I give her a place to stay, and this is the thanks I get. Accusations. Complaints. She looked back at me, her eyes cold. You know what you are, Maya? You're a leech. A leech that takes and then complains about giving back. The room froze. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The word echoed in my head. Leech. 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 I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking. Excuse me, I said quietly. I walked upstairs to my room, closed the door, and locked it. And then I started packing. I could hear them downstairs, voices raised and then falling quiet. Someone knocked on my door. Marcus, I think, but I didn't answer. I pulled my suitcases out of the closet. I started shoving clothes into them, not folding, not organizing, just packing. My laptop. My important documents. My grandmother's necklace. My favorite books. Anything that mattered. It took me 2 hours. 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. I waited until I heard people leaving, car doors slamming, voices saying goodbye. I waited until the house fell quiet except for the murmur of the TV from downstairs. Then I called a lift. I carried my suitcases down the stairs one at a time. Mom was in the kitchen, aggressively washing dishes. She didn't look at me. Dad was in his recliner. He glanced up when I appeared with my bags. Maya, he said softly. Where are you going? I'm leaving. Don't be ridiculous. Your mother didn't mean. Yes, she did. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I showed him the screen. I'm removing myself from the joint account. As of right now, I'm no longer paying your bills. You have about $2,000 in there, which should last you until the end of the month if you're careful. After that, you'll need to figure it out yourselves. His face went white. Maya, you can't. I can. I'm done. We'll lose the house. Then downsize. Like you should have done 3 years ago. Mom appeared in the doorway, her hands still wet from the sink. You selfish, ungrateful. Goodbye, Mom. I walked out the door and didn't look back. The Lyft driver helped me load my stuff into his trunk. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back one time at the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd bankrolled for 3 years, the house where my mother had called me a leech in front of everyone I was supposed to love. I started crying somewhere around the second stoplight. But they weren't sad tears. They were relief. The first few days in my new apartment were surreal. I slept on an air mattress because I didn't own furniture. I ate takeout because I didn't have dishes yet. I sat on the floor and stared at the blank walls and felt nothing, just numb. My phone exploded with messages. Marcus. Maya, seriously? You just left? Rachel. Mom is hysterical. Call me immediately. Mom, when you're done with your tantrum, we'll be here. Dad, please come home. We can work this out. Marcus, Bethany's mom says what you did is elder abuse BTW. Rachel, you're being incredibly selfish. Do you realize Mom hasn't stopped crying? Mom, I gave you everything and this is how you repay me? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I went to Target and bought sheets, towels, dishes, and a cheap coffee maker. I ordered a bed frame and a desk on Amazon. I bought groceries for one person and marveled at how little it cost. I started going to therapy. My therapist was a kind woman in her 60s named Dr. Patterson who listened to my story and then said something that made me cry for 20 minutes straight. You weren't helping them, Maya. You were enabling their dysfunction while destroying yourself. What you did wasn't abandonment. It was self-preservation. After 2 weeks, Rachel showed up at my apartment. I don't know how she got my address, probably from the bank or something. She knocked on my door at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. When I opened it, she pushed past me into my tiny living room and looked around with obvious disdain. Really, Maya? This is what you left us for? This shoebox. What do you want, Rachel? I want you to come home and apologize to Mom. I actually laughed. Apologize for what? For abandoning them. For cutting off their money without warning. Do you know what you've done? They can't afford the mortgage. Dad's medication costs are not my problem. Her jaw dropped. Excuse me. I said it's not my problem. I spent 3 years solving their problems. Now it's someone else's turn. Someone else? Maya, I have a life. I have a job and a husband and I don't. I didn't. For 3 years, Rachel, I had nothing but them. I put my entire life on hold. I spent $60,000. I worked myself into the ground. And Mom called me a leech. She was upset. She didn't mean it. She meant every word. Rachel's face twisted. You know what? Fine. Be selfish. But when Dad has another heart attack because he can't afford his medication, that's on you. She left, slamming the door behind her. I sat down on my new couch and cried. But even through the tears, I knew I'd made the right choice. Over the next month, I pieced together what was happening back at the house through my brother's increasingly frantic texts. They'd missed the first mortgage payment. The bank had sent a warning notice. Mom had called Rachel begging for money. Rachel had sent $2,000 and told her that was all she could spare. Marcus had been temporarily kicked out by Bethany after a fight and tried to move back into his old room, only to find that Mom had turned it into a storage space out of spite. He was now sleeping on their couch. Dad's disability check and pension weren't covering everything. Turns out, I'd been subsidizing their lifestyle far more than I'd even realized. Without my income, they couldn't afford their house, their cars, their cable TV, their everything. Mom had to get a job. She'd found work at a department store, folding clothes for $12 an hour. She was absolutely miserable, according to Marcus, and blamed me for it daily. They were fighting constantly. Dad was depressed. Mom was bitter. Marcus was caught in the middle and desperate to escape. Rachel had stopped taking Mom's calls because Mom kept asking for money. Their house of cards was collapsing, and I wasn't there to hold it up anymore. I wish I could say I felt nothing, that I was completely unmoved by their suffering. But the truth? I felt guilty. Even after everything, even knowing I'd made the right choice, part of me felt like I'd failed them. Like I should have tried harder, done more, been better. Dr. Patterson told me that was normal. You've been conditioned to believe their well-being is your responsibility. Breaking that conditioning takes time. So I gave myself time. And slowly, the guilt started to fade. It was 3 months after I'd left when I got the call from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Jessica Torres? Yes. This is Detective Lisa Morrison with the Sacramento Police Department. I'm calling about a report filed by your mother, Sharon Torres. She's alleging financial exploitation by a family member. Your name came up. I'd like to ask you a few questions. My blood ran cold. Financial exploitation. She was accusing me of stealing from them. What? Can you come down to the station? Or I can meet with you somewhere public if you prefer. I met Detective Morrison at a coffee shop the next day. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Your mother claims you coerced her into giving you power of attorney over her finances and then drained her bank accounts, Detective Morrison said, pulling out a notebook. She says you took approximately $60,000 over 3 years. I felt dizzy. That's not what happened at all. Why don't you tell me your version? So I did. I told her everything. And as I talked, I pulled up my bank records on my phone, showing her every transaction. Every mortgage payment I'd made. Every utility bill. Every grocery store receipt. I didn't take money from them, I said, my voice shaking. I gave them money. $60,000 of my own money. Detective Morrison studied the records carefully. Do you have any documentation showing they asked you to pay these bills? No. It was verbal. It started when my dad got sick, and it just continued. And the power of attorney? I never had power of attorney. I don't know where she got that from. Detective Morrison made a note. Okay. I'm going to need you to compile all of this documentation and send it to me. Bank statements, payment confirmations, anything that shows you were paying their expenses from your own accounts. Can you do that? Yes. She closed her notebook and looked at me directly. Off the record, this happens more often than you'd think. Adult children supporting their parents, getting burned out, and then getting accused of exploitation when they stop. It's ugly. I'm sorry you're going through this. I went home and spent the entire weekend compiling evidence. Bank statements going back 3 years. Screenshots of Venmo transfers. Copies of mortgage payment confirmations. Credit card statements showing grocery purchases and utility payments. I sent everything to Detective Morrison in a massive PDF file. A week later, she called me back. Your mother's claim has been dismissed. The evidence clearly shows you were supporting them, not exploiting them. However, she paused. Your mother is now claiming you verbally abused her and that she fears for her safety. She's trying to get a restraining order. I felt like I'd been punched. What? I wanted to give you a heads up. You'll receive official notice of the hearing. You'll want to bring your documentation to that as well. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in late March. I'd never been inside a courtroom before. I was terrified. I'd hired a lawyer, a woman named Patricia Gomez who specialized in family law. She'd reviewed my documentation and told me the case was weak, but that I should take it seriously anyway. Judges tend to be sympathetic to parents, she'd warned me. We need to present a clear picture of what really happened. Mom showed up with Rachel. They both glared at me as I walked in. The judge was a black woman in her 60s named Judge Terrell. She had the look of someone who'd seen every kind of family drama and was tired of all of it. Mom went first. Her lawyer, a young guy in an ill-fitting suit, presented her case. According to Mom's testimony, I had been verbally abusive throughout my time living at home. I'd called her names. I'd threatened her. I'd created a hostile environment. And then, when she'd finally stood up to me on Thanksgiving, I'd retaliated by abandoning them and cutting off all financial support, which was a form of elder abuse since they'd become dependent on that support. She cried on the stand, real tears streaming down her face. She was my daughter, Mom sobbed. I trusted her. I gave her a home. And she turned on me. Rachel testified next, backing up Mom's story. I'd always been difficult, she said. Controlling. Manipulative. The Thanksgiving incident had been me losing control and lashing out. I felt sick listening to them rewrite history. Then it was my turn. Patricia had coached me on what to say. Be calm. Be factual. Show emotion, but don't let it overwhelm you. I told the judge my story. I showed her the bank records. I explained how I'd moved home to help after Dad's heart attack and ended up bankrolling their entire lifestyle for 3 years. I described the mounting resentment, the lack of appreciation, the final confrontation on Thanksgiving. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady despite my shaking hands, I didn't abandon them. I saved myself. I spent $60,000 of my own money and 3 years of my life supporting them. And when I tried to set boundaries, when I tried to talk about how unsustainable it was, I was told I was selfish and ungrateful. On Thanksgiving, in front of my entire extended family, my mother called me a leech. That was when I realized I had to leave. Judge Terrell studied the bank records carefully. Then she looked up at Mom. Ms. Torres, according to these records, your daughter paid approximately $62,000 toward your household expenses over 3 years. Is that accurate? Mom's lawyer whispered something to her. She nodded reluctantly. And you're claiming she exploited you financially? She lived in our house, Mom said, her voice tight. She should have contributed. These records show she contributed significantly more than room and board would cost. Ms. Torres, did you ask your daughter to pay these bills? She offered. Did you accept her offer? Yes, but... Did you ever discuss repayment? It was family. You don't charge family. But you're now characterizing her contributions as creating a dependency that she cruelly severed? Mom's face flushed. She abandoned us without warning. Actually, Patricia interjected, my client was planning to give 2 weeks' notice before she moved out. The incident on Thanksgiving accelerated her timeline, but she didn't leave them completely unprepared. She left approximately $2,000 in the account she'd been funding, giving them time to make other arrangements. Judge Terrell made a note. Then she looked at Rachel. Ms. Morrison, you testified that your sister has always been difficult and controlling. During these 3 years when she was living with your parents and supporting them financially, what was your level of involvement? Rachel shifted uncomfortably. I live in New York. I couldn't. Did you provide any financial support during this time? I sent checks occasionally. How much, approximately? Maybe $10,000 total? Over 3 years? Yes. So your sister provided 6 times more financial support than you did, while also providing hands-on care for your father and managing the household. Is that correct? Rachel's face went red. I have my own life. I'm not judging your choices, Ms. Morrison. I'm simply establishing the facts. Judge Terrell turned back to Mom. Ms. Torres, your daughter claims that on Thanksgiving, you called her a leech in front of your extended family. Is that accurate? Mom hesitated. I was upset. She was complaining about money at the dinner table. Did you call her a leech? I may have used that word, but she was being. Yes or no, please. Yes. Judge Terrell removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She looked tired. Here's what I see, she said finally. I see a young woman who put her life on hold to care for her parents during a medical crisis. I see financial records showing extraordinary generosity, $62,000 over 3 years, plus countless hours of unpaid labor. I see a family that became comfortable relying on that generosity without acknowledging it. And I see a breaking point that occurred when the person providing all that support was publicly humiliated. She looked at Mom. Ms. Torres, what your daughter did wasn't abuse. It was a boundary. She has no legal obligation to support you financially. The fact that she did so for 3 years is remarkable. The fact that she chose to stop is her right. But they'll lose their house. Mom's voice cracked. Then perhaps it's time to consider downsizing, or seeking support from other family members, or adjusting your lifestyle to match your actual income. Those are difficult choices, but they're not your daughter's responsibility to solve. Judge Terrell stamped a paper. The petition for a restraining order is denied. Ms. Torres, I strongly encourage you and your daughter to seek family mediation if you want to repair this relationship. But this court will not be used as a weapon against someone who was helping you. We're done here. The gavel came down. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I could breathe for the first time in years. The next few months were messy. Mom and Dad lost the house. They couldn't afford the mortgage without my income, and they couldn't find anyone willing to take over payments on an underwater property. They eventually short-sold it and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a less expensive part of town. Marcus moved in with them because he couldn't afford his own place. He texted me occasionally, complaining about the cramped space and how Mom was impossible to live with. I felt a small, petty satisfaction reading those texts. Rachel stopped speaking to me entirely. She'd posted something vague on Facebook about family betrayal and selfish siblings that was clearly about me. I blocked her. Dad reached out once, sending me a long email. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was something. He said he understood why I'd left. He said he wished things had been different. He said he loved me and hoped someday we could have a relationship again. I didn't respond right away. I needed time. Through all of this, I was building my own life. I got a promotion at work. My boss had noticed my improved performance and energy, and when a senior position opened up, she recommended me. It came with a $20,000 raise. I started dating. Nothing serious at first, just casual coffee dates and dinners. It felt strange to have time and energy for romance, but it also felt good. I made new friends through a hiking group. People who didn't know my history, who saw me as just Maya. Not Maya the caretaker, not Maya the disappointment, just Maya. I decorated my apartment. I bought art for the walls. I got plants. I created a space that felt like mine. And slowly, the guilt faded. The anger faded. What remained was just peace. 6 months after the court hearing, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Maya, it's Marcus. What do you want, Marcus? I need to talk to you. Can we meet, please? Something in his voice made me say yes. We met at a neutral location, a Starbucks halfway between my apartment and where he was living with Mom and Dad. When I arrived, he looked terrible. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. Thanks for meeting me, he said quietly. What's going on? He took a deep breath. I need to apologize. For everything. For not helping when you were living with us. For not standing up for you on Thanksgiving. For the texts I sent after you left. For all of it. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Living with them now. Maya, I get it. I finally understand what you went through. Mom she's not happy. About anything. She complains constantly. She blames you for everything. She's bitter and angry and she takes it out on me and Dad. That sounds familiar. Dad's getting worse. Not his heart, his mind. I think he's depressed. He just sits there watching TV all day. He won't go for walks. He won't do anything. Marcus, why are you telling me this? Because I was wrong. We were all wrong. You weren't a leech. You were the only thing holding us together, and we didn't appreciate it until you were gone. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I felt tears prickling my eyes. Thank you for saying that. Mom won't apologize. Rachel won't either. They're both too proud. But I needed you to know that I see it now. What they did to you. What we all did to you. We talked for another hour. He told me about his plans to move out as soon as he could save enough money. I told him about my life, my job, my newfound happiness. When we parted ways, he hugged me tight. I miss you, he said. I miss my sister. I miss you too. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was a start. 2 months later, I got a call from Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, who'd been at that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. Jessica, honey, I need to tell you something, she said. I should have said this months ago, but I was trying to stay out of it. But I can't anymore. What is it? Your mother has been telling everyone that you stole money from them, that you manipulated them and took advantage of them. She's turned half the family against you. My stomach dropped. What? I know the truth. I saw your bank records from the court hearing. Your lawyer sent them to me because I'd offered to be a character witness if needed. Jessica, I had no idea you'd been supporting them like that. None of us did. Your mother never told anyone. Why are you telling me this? Because I called a family meeting. Everyone. All the cousins, all the aunts and uncles. And I showed them the evidence. I told them what really happened. I felt dizzy. Aunt Linda. Your mother is furious with me. She's not speaking to me anymore. But I don't care. What she did to you was wrong, and the lies she's been spreading are worse. I wanted you to know that people know the truth now. Not everyone believes her anymore. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and cried. Not sad tears, relieved tears. Someone had stood up for me. Someone had told the truth. The next day, I started getting messages from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins, second cousins, people I'd seen at holidays growing up. I'm so sorry, Jessica. I had no idea what you were going through. Your mom was way out of line. You did the right thing. Not everyone reached out. Some people still sided with Mom. Family loyalty trumps truth for some people. But enough people knew the real story now that I felt vindicated. I didn't need them to fix anything. I didn't need them to pressure Mom into apologizing. I just needed them to know that I wasn't the villain in this story. If you're reading this or listening to this, and something in my story resonates with you, if you're the person in your family who always gives, who always helps, who always sacrifices, I want you to hear this. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You are not selfish for having boundaries. You are not a bad person for choosing yourself. Family is supposed to be a source of support, not a drain on your resources. Love is supposed to be reciprocal, not one-sided. Help is supposed to be temporary, not permanent. If the people in your life only value you for what you can give them, they don't actually value you. They value your utility. And you deserve so much more than that. Leaving is hard. Setting boundaries is hard. Choosing yourself when everyone else is calling you selfish is really, really hard. But staying is harder. Losing yourself is harder. Spending your life being someone's emotional support animal or ATM is harder. I know because I lived it. And I'm here to tell you that the other side exists. The side where you have peace, where you have autonomy, where you have a life that belongs to you. It's worth it. You're worth it. My name is Jessica Torres, and I'm not a leech. I never was. I'm just someone who finally learned that love without respect isn't love at all. And I deserve better. We all do.